Anthony Wells had $2 left in his wallet and a 6-year-old daughter to feed when he spotted the small navy blue passport lying on the cracked sidewalk outside the corner bodega. He glanced around. No one nearby. Just the usual late afternoon bustle of midtown honking taxis, a hot dog cart steaming near the curb, and his own daughter tugging gently at his hand. "Daddy, I'm hungry," Ava whispered, her oversized backpack slipping off one shoulder. "I know, baby. Just a sec," Anthony said, scooping up the passport. It was warm from the sun, expensive leather. He flipped it open instinctively. Gillian Knoll. The photo showed a woman with green eyes, soft brown curls, and a serious expression. American, mid-30s, stamped pages from at least 10 countries. He sighed. "Well, Gillian, you picked the wrong day to lose this." He looked across the street, where a tall woman in a beige coat had stopped at the edge of the sidewalk, patting her pockets frantically. "Excuse me," Anthony called out, jogging forward as Ava clung to his side. The woman turned, her eyes locked on the passport in his hand. "Oh my God," she breathed, "that's mine." Anthony handed it over. "You dropped it back there." She looked stunned for a second, then let out a relieved exhale. "Thank you, you just saved my life." "No problem," he said, giving a small nod. "It happens." "You have no idea," she murmured, still staring at him. Ava tugged his sleeve again. "Daddy." "Right, sorry, kiddo," he said, gently guiding her away. "Wait," the woman said quickly. "Let me buy you both lunch, please. I insist." Anthony hesitated. "That's kind, but we're good." "You're not," she said quietly. "I mean, she just said she was hungry." He turned back to her, unsure what to say. There was something in her voice honest, a little raw. "I know a place," she added. "It's 2 blocks away. Real food, my treat." He studied her. She didn't look like someone trying to earn points. There was no smugness in her tone, just sincerity. He looked down at Ava. "You okay with that?" Ava nodded shyly. "All right," Anthony said, "but only lunch." The place wasn't a diner. It was a sleek, glass-fronted restaurant with white velvet seats, gold-rimmed water glasses, and a hostess who raised an eyebrow when Gillian walked in. "Ms. Knoll," the hostess said, lips parting in recognition. "Welcome back." Anthony blinked. They were led to a private booth in the back. Gillian ordered a charcuterie board, truffle pasta, and a kid's mac and cheese, with extra cheese and a side of strawberries, before he even opened the menu. "I'm guessing you've been here before," Anthony said dryly. "A few times," she said with a small smile. "So," he said, raising a brow, "what kind of job lets you travel the world and eat like this?" "I'm in logistics," she said. "Like shipping." "Something like that," she said, avoiding his gaze. "What about you?" Anthony leaned back. "Construction. I used to do a lot more of it, but, well, it's been a rough year." Gillian's eyes flicked toward Ava, who was now happily coloring on the kids' menu. "You're a single dad." "Yeah." "Where's her mom?" "She left when Ava was 4, said she didn't sign up for the hard parts." Gillian's expression softened. "That must have been tough." He shrugged. "You adapt, she's everything to me." "I can see that," she said quietly. Their food arrived, and the next hour passed in the kind of easy rhythm Anthony hadn't felt in years. Gillian asked Ava questions about school, listened to her stories, even helped her cut up her food like she'd known her forever. Anthony watched the two of them, a strange warmth blooming in his chest. After dessert, which Gillian insisted on ordering, Anthony stood and reached for his wallet. "No," she said, cutting him off. "You return my passport. This is the least I can do." "You already did more than enough." I wanted to. He looked at her, really looked at her. You're not what I expected, he said. She tilted her head. What did you expect? Someone who'd say thank you and walk away. Well, she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, maybe I was hoping not to. They walked out into the early evening light together. Gillian knelt beside Ava and handed her a small white box. Something for later, she said. Ava opened it. Inside was a strawberry cupcake with a sugar-pink rose on top. Thank you, Ava beamed. Gillian stood, her eyes meeting Anthony's. Can I see you both again? He hesitated. I'm not asking for anything, she added quickly. Just, like today. He nodded slowly. Yeah, me too. They exchanged phone numbers written on a napkin, old school, and she waved as she climbed into a black car that pulled up like it had been waiting for her all along. Anthony watched it drive away, a strange feeling twisting in his gut. He didn't know her, not really. But something about her felt real, in a way he hadn't felt in a long time. They saw her again the next weekend. And the one after that. Sometimes it was a park picnic. Once, it was the Children's Museum. Gillian showed up with Ava's favorite snacks, remembered her teacher's name, and knew exactly how to braid her hair. Anthony found himself looking forward to their weekends more than he wanted to admit. One Saturday, as they sat by the East River watching boats pass, Gillian turned to him. Can I ask you something personal? Sure. If you weren't, dealing with so much, what would you want to do? He blinked. You mean for work? For anything, for your life. He paused. I used to want to start my own contracting business, had a name picked out and everything, Wells and Walls. She smiled. That's catchy. Yeah, well, it's hard to dream when you're counting quarters for groceries. He meant it as a joke, but Gillian didn't laugh. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket and handed him a folded brochure. It was an info packet for a city grant program for small business owners. I saw this and thought of you, she said quietly. You'd be good at it. Something shifted in his chest. Why are you doing all this? He asked. She looked at him. Because I like you, both of you. He didn't know what to say. So he said nothing. Later that night, after Ava was asleep, he sat at the kitchen table and unfolded the brochure again. Gillian Knoll. There was something about her, something he didn't understand yet. But he wanted to. It was raining the next time Gillian came by. Not the soft kind that made you want to stay in and watch movies, but a heavy, relentless downpour that turned the sidewalks into rivers. Anthony had just finished patching a leaky window in a brownstone in Brooklyn when he saw her waiting in the front seat of a silver SUV parked across the street from Ava's school. He crossed with his jacket pulled up over his head. What are you doing here? Gillian rolled down the window and leaned across the seat. You said you were working late. Figured Ava might like a ride home. Anthony exhaled, rain dripping from his sleeves. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to, she said. Besides, I brought snacks. He hesitated, then walked around and climbed into the passenger seat. The inside smelled like warm leather and citrus. Ava was in the back, happily munching on a bag of seaweed chips and chatting about a class project. Gillian listened with the kind of focus most adults didn't give kids. She asked questions, not just polite ones, but specific ones that made Ava light up. Anthony watched her from the corner of his eye. She was different, thoughtful in a way people rarely were anymore. When they pulled up outside his building, Gillian didn't make a move to leave. You want to come up? He asked, the question surprising even him. She glanced at him, then nodded. The apartment was small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, wallpaper peeling in spots, and an ancient heater that made clanking noises when the temperature dropped. But it was clean, lived in, and warm. Gillian walked slowly through the kitchen, her fingers brushing lightly over the counter. "It smells like cinnamon." "Ava and I made muffins last night," he said. "They didn't rise right, but they taste okay." "I'd love one," she said. He handed her one from the chipped ceramic plate beside the sink. She took a bite, then smiled. "Still better than anything I've ever baked." "You bake?" he asked. "I try. It doesn't go well." Ava ran to her room, leaving them alone in the kitchen. Gillian leaned against the fridge. "You ever think about moving?" He leaned on the opposite counter. "All the time, but rent's a beast and Ava's school is good. We make do." She nodded, then looked down, her expression unreadable. "What?" he asked. She looked up. "Nothing, just, I like it here, it feels real." He didn't know what to make of that. "Where do you live?" She hesitated. "Downtown." He raised an eyebrow. "Like Tribeca?" "Just south of there." He let out a low whistle. "That's not exactly a 2-bedroom walk-up." "No," she said with a small laugh. "It's not." He watched her closely. "You don't talk much about yourself." "That's true." "Why?" She shifted, then met his eyes. "Because I like how you look at me now." "And how's that?" "Like I'm not something I never asked to be." He didn't ask what that meant, not yet. "Instead," he said, "you want to stay for dinner." She looked genuinely surprised. "You're cooking." "I've got half a lasagna in the fridge. It's not gourmet, but it's edible." "I'd love to." While he reheated dinner, Gillian sat at the table and helped Ava with her spelling homework. Her hair was damp from the rain, curling slightly near her shoulders. She laughed when Ava made up words and offered gentle corrections when she got them wrong. Dinner was quiet, comfortable, the kind of evening Anthony hadn't had in years. After Ava went to bed, Gillian stayed. They sat on the couch, a threadbare blanket over their legs, watching an old movie on mute while the rain tapped steadily against the windows. "You ever think about what you'd do if none of this had happened?" he asked suddenly. Gillian turned toward him. "What do you mean?" "If life had gone differently, if you'd grown up somewhere else, done something else." She was quiet for a moment, then all the time. "What would you have done?" "I wanted to be a writer," she said, "when I was a kid. I used to fill notebooks with stories." "What happened?" "My family didn't think it was practical, so I studied business and things, spiraled." He nodded. "I get that. I wanted to be an architect once." She looked at him. "You'd have been good at it. You see things other people miss." He went still. No one had ever said that to him before. He cleared his throat. "So this business you're in, it keeps you busy?" "Yes," she said, "too busy sometimes." "You ever think about slowing down?" "Lately, more than I used to." They didn't kiss, he didn't touch her, but when she left an hour later, something had changed. He felt it in the air, in the way she lingered at the door, in the way she looked over her shoulder right before she slipped out into the night. The next morning, he found an envelope taped to his door. No name, just a thin, elegant envelope with a card inside. It was an invitation. Formal, embossed, gold lettering, the kind of thing you only saw in movies. "You are cordially invited to the Knoll Foundation Benefit Gala." He stared at it for a long time, then flipped it over. "2 guest passes." He didn't call her, didn't text. He just stared at the invitation until Ava wandered over and tugged his sleeve. "Is that a wedding?" "No," he said slowly. "It's a fancy party." Are we going? He looked at her excited face, then back at the card. I guess we are. 3 days later, they stood outside a building that looked more like a palace than a hotel. Anthony wore the only suit he owned, borrowed from a friend and slightly tight in the shoulders. Ava wore a dress Gillian had given her the week before, deep purple satin with tiny silver stars along the hem. They stepped inside, and the world changed. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. Waiters in tuxedos carried trays of champagne. A string quartet played near the sweeping staircase, and every person in the room looked like they lived on a different planet. Gillian found them near the entrance. She wore a silver gown that shimmered with every step, her hair pinned back in soft waves. But it wasn't the dress that stopped Anthony's breath. It was the way she looked at him. Like he belonged there, like he wasn't a man out of place. I'm glad you came, she said. Are you going to tell me what this is? He asked. She glanced around. Not here, come with me. She led them through a side corridor, away from the clinking glasses and polished smiles. They stepped onto a glass elevator that rose silently, revealing the city skyline as they ascended. At the top, a private lounge overlooked the river. Gillian walked to the window, her back to him. I didn't lie, she said. Told you I worked in logistics. Yes, he said carefully. You just left out the part where your name's on the building. She turned. I wanted you to know me first, before all this. He shook his head. You're a billionaire. Yes. He let out a slow breath. I don't even know what to say. Say you're not walking away. He looked at her. You lied. I protected something, she said. The last time someone found out who I really was, they tried to sell a story to the tabloids. I've spent most of my adult life wondering if people like me or my bank account. He crossed the room and stood in front of her. I'm not for sale. I know. But you should have told me. I know that too. He looked down at the city below, then back at her. Why me? Because you gave my passport back and didn't ask for anything. Because you love your daughter more than anything. Because you make me laugh. Because you never looked at me like was a headline. He was silent. Then quietly, I don't know if I belong in your world. She stepped closer. Then come with me and help me build a new one. He didn't answer, not yet. But when she reached for his hand, he didn't pull away. Anthony had never been on a private jet before. He'd never even seen one up close until Gillian led him and Ava across the tarmac, her heels clicking against the concrete as the crew greeted her by name and took their coats like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. The invitation had come a week after the gala, the same week she showed up at his apartment with a folder of documents and a quiet, steady offer to help him apply for the small business grant. She hadn't pushed. She'd simply handed him the folder, said, "You deserve more than survival," and waited. Now they were headed to Boston. Gillian had a 2-day board meeting for one of the companies under the Knoll Foundation's umbrella. She'd invited them along, promising Ava the aquarium and promising Anthony nothing, only that she wanted him there. Inside the cabin, Ava settled into a white leather seat with a coloring book while Anthony sat across from Gillian, trying not to gawk at the wood-paneled interior, the crystal water glasses, or the way the flight attendant addressed Gillian as MS. Knoll, with quiet reverence. This doesn't get old to you? He asked, glancing at the chilled fruit tray that had appeared a few minutes after takeoff. Gillian leaned back, adjusting the thin gold chain around her neck. The jet, a little; the company, never. He watched her for a moment. You run all this? She nodded. My grandfather started the foundation. My father expanded it, rebuilt it. He raised an eyebrow. Rebuilt? When I took over 5 years ago, we were hemorrhaging money. bad investments, internal corruption, a few board members who thought I was too young to lead. Cleaned house. He let out a low whistle. You ever sleep? Sometimes. I schedule it like everything else. He shook his head, then reached for a grape. You know, most people would have just sold the whole thing and disappeared to an island. I thought about it, but then I remembered what my mother used to say. What's that? If you have more than you need, build a longer table, not a higher wall. He looked at her differently then, not with awe, not with suspicion, but with something quieter, something closer to respect. They landed just after noon. A driver waited with a sign that read Knoll in large block letters, and within 20 minutes they were checked into a suite overlooking the harbor, the skyline gleaming through tall windows that made Anthony feel like he'd stepped into a different life entirely. That night, while Gillian attended a formal dinner with her board, Anthony took Ava to the aquarium as promised. They wandered through glass tunnels teeming with neon fish, watched sea lions bark and twist through water, and shared a soft pretzel under the glow of hanging jellyfish. Do you like her? Ava asked as they rode the elevator back to their floor. He glanced down at her. Gillian. Ava nodded, hugging the stuffed penguin Gillian had left for her on the bed earlier. I do, he said honestly. Does she like us? I think she does. Ava tilted her head. She listens when I talk, not just in a pretend way. Anthony smiled faintly. Yeah, I noticed. The next morning, Gillian returned from her meetings earlier than expected. A rare free afternoon stretched before them. She suggested lunch at a tiny harbor-side restaurant, the kind with paper tablecloths and seafood that tasted like it had been pulled from the ocean an hour before. They sat outside, the wind teasing Gillian's hair as she plucked a scallop off her plate and passed it to Ava. I want to ask you both something, she said, folding her napkin carefully. Anthony raised an eyebrow. That sounds serious. It is, she said, kind of. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small velvet box. Anthony froze. That's not. No, she laughed, not that. She opened it to reveal a delicate key on a slim chain. I bought a property outside the city. It's not finished yet, but it has a garden and space for a workshop, and it's close to a great school. He stared at her. Are you asking us to move in with you? I'm asking you to consider it, she said. I know it's fast. I know this is new, but I want to build something real, not just dates and quick visits, a life. Ava leaned toward the key. Does it have a treehouse? Gillian smiled. Not yet. Anthony rubbed the back of his neck. You really think this could work? I don't think, she said. I hope. I want to try. He didn't answer right away. He watched the boats bobbing in the harbor, the seagulls circling overhead, the way Gillian's hand trembled slightly as she held the box out to him. He took the key. We'll try. After that, things moved quickly. Over the next few weeks, the house became real. It was a modern glass and stone structure nestled into a hillside overlooking the Hudson, with wide decks and a kitchen that looked like it had never seen a dirty dish. But it wasn't the luxury that drew Anthony in, it was the way Gillian had designed a room just for Ava, complete with a reading nook and shelves already filled with her favorite books. She didn't just make space for them, she made it feel like they'd always been there. Still, Anthony struggled with the shift. One night, as he stood in the half-finished garage sketching blueprints for his business proposal, Gillian came in barefoot, holding 2 mugs of coffee. You're quiet tonight, she said, handing him a cup. He nodded, just thinking. Want to tell me? He hesitated. Sometimes feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. She leaned on the workbench beside him. Because this feels too good. Because it doesn't feel like mine. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, do you know why I chose this house? He shook his head. Because it had a workshop. Because the light in this room is perfect in the morning. Because I could see you in it. He looked at her. I didn't build this for you to owe me, she said softly. I built it because I believe in you. That night, he stayed up until 3, finalizing the proposal. The next morning, he drove into the city and submitted it in person. A week later, he got the grant. Gillian didn't throw a party. She didn't make a big gesture. She handed him a leather-bound planner, kissed him on the cheek, and said, "Let's get to work." They spent the next month turning his vision into reality. She helped him secure permits, introduced him to architects, connected him with a contractor who didn't flinch at his budget. But she never took over. She stood beside him, not in front. Late one night, after tucking Ava in and turning off the lights, Anthony found Gillian on the deck, staring out at the dark water. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, but didn't turn around. "I got a call today," she said, "from Zurich." He waited. "My father's company, one of the legacy holdings. They want me to take the chair position." He stepped closer. "That's good, right?" It would mean moving, travel, responsibility I walked away from once already. He frowned. "You're thinking about taking it?" "I'm thinking about what it means if I don't." He didn't answer. She turned to him, her eyes unreadable. "I've built my life around control, around being the one who never needs anything. But lately, I don't want to be in charge of everything." He watched her, the vulnerability in her voice hitting him like a punch. "You don't have to be," he said, "not with me." Her breath caught. "I'm not perfect," he continued. "I've made mistakes. I've had days where I didn't know how I'd keep going, but I'm here, I'm in this. And if you're asking me if I want more, if I want you, us, then yeah, I do." She stepped into his arms without a word, resting her head against his chest. They stood like that for a long time, the stars above them, the river below, and the weight of everything unsaid finally lifting between them. The spring wind carried the scent of fresh rain and honeysuckle through the open windows of the house on the Hudson. Anthony stood outside the workshop, hands dusted with wood shavings, staring at the half-built display cabinet he was finishing for the new office space in town. His phone buzzed on the work table beside him, but he didn't move to check it. Inside, Gillian was packing. Not boxes she wasn't leaving, but a travel bag for a 2-day trip to Zurich. The offer from her father's company hadn't disappeared, and though she hadn't accepted the role, she'd agreed to fly out for one final conversation. One last look at what her life might have been before Anthony, before Ava, before she realized how empty it had all felt. Ava was with Margie, a retired teacher from the neighborhood who babysat on weekends when Anthony had jobs or meetings. He'd asked her to stay until Gillian got back. He didn't like the idea of Ava being with someone else overnight, but Gillian had offered him the choice: come with her or stay. He'd chosen to stay. Not because he didn't want to be with her, but because he needed to know what she'd choose when he wasn't standing next to her. Gillian appeared at the workshop door, suitcase in one hand, coat draped over her arm. "Car's here," she said quietly. Anthony wiped his hands on a rag, but didn't step forward. "You packed light." "I'm not planning to stay long." "You sure you're ready to walk into that room again?" She hesitated. "No." He nodded once. She looked at him, eyes searching. "Will you be here when I get back?" He met her gaze. "Unless you come back someone else." "I won't." "You used to be." She stepped forward slowly. "I used to be a lot of things, but I'm not her anymore." He reached for her hand, fingers brushing hers. "Then I'll be here." She didn't kiss him, There wasn't time, and maybe it would have made it harder to walk away. Instead, she turned and walked toward the waiting car, the gravel crunching beneath her heels. He watched until the tail lights disappeared down the winding road. The house felt heavier without her in it. That night, Anthony sat with Ava on the couch, watching her read aloud from one of her books. Her voice was steady, eyes tracking each word with slow determination. "She's coming back, right?" Ava asked, not looking up from the page. Anthony ran a hand down her braid. "She said she would." "Do you believe her?" He paused. "I do." Ava nodded once and kept reading. The next morning, Anthony opened the email from the City Business Commission confirming the final approval of his permits. The Wells and Walls storefront would open in 6 weeks. He stared at the message longer than necessary, then turned off the screen and walked out to the backyard. Ava's swing set swayed in the breeze. He'd built it 2 weeks ago, after Gillian had mentioned wanting something simple that didn't look like it came from a catalog. He'd carved her initials into one of the beams, not Gillian's, but Ava's. It felt like the right place to make something permanent. By afternoon, the sky had clouded again. Rain threatened, but never came. Anthony stayed busy, moving between the garage and the garden, anything to keep his hands working while his thoughts spun in tight, useless circles. He didn't hear from Gillian that night. Not the next morning either. But on the third evening, just as he was locking up the workshop, headlights cut through the trees at the end of the drive. He didn't move, just stood there, sawdust clinging to his jeans, heart thudding in his chest. The door of the car opened, and Gillian stepped out. No coat, no suitcase. Just her. She crossed the gravel slowly, her heels silent this time. "I didn't take it," she said before he could speak. He exhaled. "Why not?" "Because I was sitting in that boardroom, looking at a table full of people who have never asked me what I wanted. They just expect me to be who I was, and I realized I'd rather disappoint them than lose you." He watched her jaw tight. "You didn't call." "I needed to be sure. I needed to walk out of that room without looking back." He nodded once, and now. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded paper. "I signed over my voting shares. I'll keep the title in name only, but I'm done running the company." His brows lifted. "You handed them your legacy." "I traded it for a future." She stepped closer, stopping just in front of him. "I didn't fall in love with you because you fixed things. I fell for you because you saw me when I didn't even know who I was anymore. I want a life with you, Anthony, not a performance." His voice cracked. "You're serious?" "I'm done pretending I'm not." He reached for her then, pulling her into his arms as the first drops of rain began to fall. She didn't shiver. She didn't step away. He kissed her like he'd been holding his breath for days. She kissed him back like she'd never left. They stood there, rain soaking through their clothes, thunder rumbling in the distance, and neither one moved until Ava's voice called from the porch. "Is that her?" Anthony turned, lifting Gillian's hand in his. "Yeah, baby, she's home." That night, they didn't go to bed early. They sat around the kitchen table eating reheated pasta and laughing at Ava's impressions of her school librarian. Gillian braided Ava's hair before bed, humming softly under her breath, fingers moving with practiced ease. Later, when the house was quiet, Anthony and Gillian stood in the hallway outside Ava's room, watching her sleep. "She calls you home when she talks about you," he said quietly. Gillian's voice was soft. "I never had that growing up." "And now you do." She turned to him. "So do you." Weeks passed. The storefront opened with a modest ribbon-cutting ceremony and a steady stream of curious neighbors. Gillian stayed in the background, letting Anthony take the spotlight. She wore jeans and sneakers and helped paint the last of the trim without a single complaint. The business grew fast, not because of money, though Gillian's quiet investments helped, but because of Anthony's reputation. He built things well. He hired people who needed second chances. He treated customers like family. One afternoon, as they were locking up for the day, Gillian leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You ever think we'd end up here?" she asked. He looked at her, hair twisted up, paint on her cheek. "Not even in my wildest dreams." She pulled something from her pocket, a small, folded piece of paper. "What's this?" "You'll see." He unfolded it slowly. It was a birth certificate application. He looked up stunned. "You're pregnant." She nodded, tears already brimming. He stepped forward, his hands on her face. "Are you scared?" "A little." "I'm not." "Why not?" "Because I've already got everything I need." Months later, they were married in the backyard, beneath the tree Anthony had planted with Ava the summer before. The ceremony was small, just close friends, a few neighbors, and Gillian's cousin who officiated. Ava walked down the aisle holding a bouquet twice her size, grinning like it was the best day of her life. Gillian wore a simple silk gown. Anthony wore a tailored suit she'd given him the night before, embroidered with the initials of their new family on the inside pocket. When they exchanged vows, there were no grand declarations, no practice speeches. Just truth. Just promises they already lived. And when he kissed her, it wasn't the start of something. It was the continuation of everything they'd built, honest, imperfect, and real. After the reception, Gillian pulled Anthony aside, her voice low. "There's one more thing." "What now?" he asked, smiling. She handed him a deed. It was for a small plot of land just outside the city. "For the second location," she said, "Wells and Walls is going to need more room." He stared at her. "You're serious?" "I believe in building things," she said, "especially with you." They stood together, hand in hand, as Ava ran across the lawn chasing fireflies and the soft hum of music carried through the night. And for the first time in his life, Anthony didn't feel like he was surviving. He felt like he'd finally come home. Anthony adjusted the strap on the baby carrier slung across his chest, glancing down at the tiny bundle nestled against him. His daughter, barely 3 weeks old, and already somehow ruling his entire world, let out a soft sigh and curled deeper into his shirt. The workshop was quiet, afternoon sunlight spilling through the wide windows and catching the thin strands of sawdust that danced lazily in the air. Gillian walked in, barefoot and balancing a mug of tea in one hand and a clipboard in the other. Her hair was tied into a loose bun, and she wore one of his old flannel shirts over leggings stretched over her still healing frame. She stopped at the doorway, her eyes landing on the sight of him gently rocking their baby while sketching something on a pad of grid paper. "You're doing it again," she said, voice low but teasing. He looked up. "Doing what?" "Designing with one hand while wearing a human being like a fashion accessory." He grinned. "She's got opinions. Started crying when I used the wrong kind of pencil." Gillian walked over and leaned in to kiss the top of the baby's head. "She gets that from me." "No argument here." She set the tea down and slid onto the stool beside him. "I just finished reviewing the zoning approval for the second store. It's greenlit." He raised his brows. "Already?" "Turns out the city really likes you. Or maybe it's your business partner who has a few connections." "You mean the woman who negotiates like a shark and smells weakness in a permit application from 2 counties away?" She tilted her head. "Sounds familiar." He brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not holding back, for showing me it could do more. She looked away for a moment, then back at him. You know, I spent most of my life thinking success meant being the smartest person in every room. Now, I realize the best thing I ever did was step into a room and not know what the hell I was doing because you were in it. His throat tightened, but he didn't speak. He just set the pencil down and reached for her hand. They stayed like that for a long moment, the baby stirring slightly in her sleep, the silence between them filled with quiet certainty. Later that evening, they drove into town for the first time as a family of 4 Ava bouncing in the back seat beside her baby sister's car seat, narrating the weather and pointing out every dog she saw, while Gillian rested her hand on Anthony's thigh and occasionally leaned over to whisper a joke that made him nearly miss a turn. Their destination was a modest building just off Main Street, the new Wells and Walls location. It wasn't flashy, no marble floors or chrome finishes, but it had wide windows, exposed beams, and the kind of charm that felt earned, not bought. As they walked through the space, Gillian paused near the back wall, where construction supplies were still piled. I was thinking, she said, what if we added a design showroom? You could feature custom pieces, maybe offer workshops for kids. He looked at her surprised. Really? She nodded. I want this place to grow because of what it adds to the town, not just the revenue. He studied her for a moment. Have I turned you into a small business romantic? Maybe, she said, or maybe it just like watching you build things that last. Ava wandered over, holding a scrap of wood. Can I make something? Anthony crouched beside her. What do you want to make? A treasure box, one with a lock. He smiled. I think we can do that. Back at home, after the kids were asleep, one in her bunk bed surrounded by glow in the dark stars, the other in a bassinet beside their bed, Anthony found Gillian on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket and staring at the moonlight dancing on the river. He joined her, pulling her close against him. You tired? She asked. Exhausted, you. Same. They stood in silence for a beat. Then she said, I was looking through some old photos today, ones from before I met you. He traced his thumb along her spine. Dangerous territory. Not really. I didn't recognize myself in most of them. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. She continued, you know what I realized? All those years, I kept trying to become someone who could never be hurt. But now, feel everything, and I'm still standing. He kissed her temple. You're more than standing. I'm in love, she whispered, and I'm not afraid of what that means anymore. He turned her gently to face him. I love you, Gillian, all of you, not just the parts that are polished or perfect. She looked at him, eyes shining. I know, that's why I married you. They laughed softly, and he kissed her again, slower this time, deeper. The kind of kiss that came after every wall had been pulled down, after every fear had been named and faced. In the weeks that followed, they settled into a rhythm. Not a perfect one. There were sleepless nights, baby cries, forgotten school forms, and a leaky pipe that needed 3 tries to fix, but it was theirs. Gillian surprised Anthony one afternoon by bringing lunch to the store and announcing she'd registered for an art program in the city. Even billionaires need hobbies, she'd said, grinning as she unpacked sandwiches and a modest portfolio of sketches she'd been hiding for months. He framed one of them, a charcoal rendering of Ava and the baby curled together on the couch, and hung it in the new office. On a warm Saturday in late June, they hosted a community event at the shop. Local vendors set up booths, kids painted birdhouses, and Gillian organized a silent auction that raised thousands for the town's library renovation. Toward the end of the afternoon, Anthony stood under the wide canvas tent, holding the baby while Ava ran around with her friends, and Gillian handed out lemonade with the mayor. Hey, she called, walking over and slipping her hand into his. You see what you've built. He kissed her cheek. We built it. No, she said, you did. I just believed in you. They danced that night under hanging lights and a sky full of stars. A local band playing acoustic covers while neighbors clapped and swayed nearby. Later, after the last guest had gone and Ava had fallen asleep on a blanket in the grass, Gillian and Anthony sat on the porch steps, their youngest tucked against his chest. I've been thinking, she said. Good thinking, or the kind that ends in us buying a goat? Depends how you feel about goats. He laughed. What is it? I want to start a grant for people like you, people who have ideas but no access, no safety net. His brow lifted. A Wells and Knoll fund. Exactly. He nodded slowly. You're serious. I'm always serious when it comes to building things that matter. He leaned over and kissed her, the baby sighing between them. Then let's do it. As the sun dipped behind the hills, casting the world in amber and gold, they sat there together, husband and wife, parents, builders, believers, surrounded by everything they'd nearly lost and everything they'd found in each other. And for the first time in either of their lives, there was nothing missing. No masks left to wear, no secrets left to hide. Only love. Only home.